Welcome to Project Top Fuel Part 4.5. Okay, so Part 4 was actually a live that we attempted to do last night. Doc and I set up here, and I wanted to go through the whole fuel system, from the pump through the valve, through the lines and nozzles and everything else. Give a complete tour of the fuel system, and I figured it would be cool if we did it live because anybody has any questions, we can answer them real time and we can show, a little bit better than you can with a video. So we set up to do that, and we got about 20 more minutes into it, and the router took a dump. So that was the end of that. But I figured, well, we'll just pick up where we left off. And last night where we left off, there'll be a link to that live in the description of this video if you want more detailed information. But where we left off was this. We covered the fuel pump. This is a Hilborn 175-4. Its characteristics and all of that. Fuel shut off. We went pretty in depth on the barrel valve. In this case, it's an Enderley K valve. We talked about the pump saver. We talked about the idle check valve. We talked about the main jet, and we got pretty in depth in how to set the initial fuel setting with the barrel valve by eye. So here's the thing. Anybody who's following along in this series, I want to give them as much information as I can. I want to make it so that if they're really serious about doing this, if they are deranged enough to actually try to attempt this on their own, that they would have enough information based on these videos that they could put the car together, set it up, have it start and run and perform basic functions. And then from that point, you're on your own. Very few people are going to attempt this, but a lot of people are interested in the topic and they want to see how these cars actually work. So I think it's a good video series, even if it really doesn't apply anywhere in the world anymore. And that's an important distinction I have to make here, because everything I'm going to show you now with the flow of the fuel system, like I said, we started with the pump and the barrel valve, and we left off where now the fuel is actually going to start entering the engine. So that's what we're going to pick up. Anything I'm going to show you now is going to apply to older style open bottom blowers. Okay, so these cars and the evolution of fuel motors were all based on the GMC 671, then the 871, and then a 10 and a 14. But through the course of the evolution, the bottom of the blower stayed the same. A big rectangular opening. One that actually matches that opening. Okay. What I'm going to show you on this fuel system applies only to that style blower. Back around 1995-2000, they started making the blowers with a closed bottom, and they have like a triangle shaped, like a delta shaped opening at the very front of it, right here. When they made that change to blowers, these fuel systems changed to match. So cars that use that type of blower use a dribbler system. Okay, much more involved than I want to get into here now. I just want to focus on this system. But if you understand how this works, then you can figure out how everything else works. So we were talking about the barrel valve. Barrel valve mounts like so, and your idle mixture is adjusted through that turnbuckle right there. Okay, and what you're going to do is when you're going to adjust this, and this is only to adjust your idle mixture, and the idle mixture is super important, and I'll get to that towards the end of the video. What you're going to do is you're going to set your air gap first, and we talked about that in another video. Then you're going to set your barrel valve by eye, the way we showed you on that live, and then you're going to make your adjustments through this turnbuckle. Now when you go to make adjustments here, this is very important to know if you ever try this yourself. If you're used to tuning the idle mixture on, let's say, a carburetor, you turn the screw, let's say you go a quarter turn, half turn, and immediately there's a change. You don't get that with nitro. There's there's a delayed reaction. Half a second, but it's not immediate. And if you're not aware of that, you'll start twisting away at this thing, trying to get it to do what you want it to do, and you make a mess of things. When you adjust the barrel valve, your idle mixture with this, You go one flat at a time, and then you wait a second. Half a second, a second. It'll seem like an eternity, but you wait a half a second, and then you keep going. And you're going to be watching the pipes. We're going to get into that later. But I just wanted to throw that in there. Like I said, in case you ever try to do this yourself. All right. So now, we're at the point that we're going to open the throttle. No, wait. We're not there yet. We're not there yet. We're idling. Okay, the engine is idling. The idle check valve is keeping the pressure at about 7 pounds. And that's what these hat lines are going to see. Now, at idle, no fuel is allowed to go through the port lines. That fuel is held back by this check valve right here. And this is your port check valve. This is going to be shimmed for between 12 and 15 pounds. So in other words, until the fuel pressure rises above, or until the fuel pressure that the lines see rises above 12 to 15 pounds, the port lines are going to be kept dry. And that's one of the differences between the modern systems and these older systems. Okay. So we'll get to the ports in a minute, but right now the engine is just sitting there idling. Now, because of the way fuel is distributed through the blower, the way fuel and air are distributed through the blower, we were talking about how, in a previous video, how air is pulled to the front and fuel is pulled to the back through a couple of different mechanisms. One of them is during acceleration, the heavy droplets of fuel want to gravitate towards the back. Whatever fuel is puddling in the plenum of the intake manifold wants to get sent to the back. But then it also, as the car is going down the track, you've got air coming into the scoop, and as the car is going down, the air is coming in, it's catching some of the fuel at the front and carrying it to the back of the scoop above the blower. So because of that, there's going to be a stagger built into the nozzles. So here's our initial setup on this engine. We're going to put a pair of 80s in the front. Now, even though it looks like there's a correlation directly with the cylinders, so this would be cylinder number 1, this is 3, number 5, it's not like that. There's so much that happens between the hat and the blower that there's not really a direct correlation between these nozzles and what each individual cylinder is going to see. But the stagger is important. So we're going to go 80s, 70s, 60s, and 50s across. And that's going to be our idle, our low speed, our idle circuit. So in other words, your foot isn't on the throttle, everything's closed. That's how the fuel is going to enter the blower. It is going to bias the fuel somewhat to the front. So when you're setting your barrel valve, you're going to be setting it and you're really going to be watching the back cylinders. So when you're setting the idle on one of these things, what you want is a light mist out of the pipes. Okay? So in other words, the car's up on the jack stands. Engine's running. Okay? And you're going to adjust the barrel valve until you see your driest cylinders. So you're going to see like mist coming out of the pipes. You watch modern top fuel cars and they're just blowing clouds of the stuff in the air. When we're talking about these older cars, you're only looking for a light mist out of the pipes. And you're going to set your barrel valve to your driest cylinders. So when you see your driest cylinders, and they'll generally be someplace in the back, start to show a little mist, that's where you stop with this. The front cylinders might be spraying, a fair amount, but you adjust the turnbuckle to where your driest cylinders are starting to show a little mist. Now, what you're going to do is, this is with the car on the jack stands, engine is running, warmed, engine's running, and the back wheels are just freewheeling. There's no load on the engine. Once you do this, once you've established that, you're going to have your driver pull on a brake. Now, when he pulls on a brake, it's going to stop the back tires. When it stops the back tires, it's going to put a load on the clutch. There's a stall speed setting on a clutch. It's different than the stall speed of let's say, a torque converter. But there's a stall speed setting. It's going to put some resistance against the engine when the wheels are stationary. When the driver pulls on the brake, you want to see those misting pipes dry up. Okay? The wetter ones, maybe not completely, you'll still see a little bit. It's a judgment call. You just have to watch over the bank of the engine and see. But at that point, when the driver pulls the brakes, you want to hear the engine lug down a little bit. Its tone will change. It'll go from right? and you're going to see your driest pipes at that point dry up. If everything goes well there, that's when you give it your throttle whack and make sure that everything returns back to normal. So that's your idle setting. That's about what you're looking for when you're setting the barrel valve, and that's the stagger that we're going to use on these hat lines. And just in case you're not familiar, at the back of the barrel valve, you've got these two openings. They're open to a common passage inside, so they see the same amount of fuel. The pressure that the top one is going to see, now again, they're open in the center, but the top one is plumbed to the hat lines. The pressure that that's going to see is what the idle check valve is going to allow. So in this case, it's going to be 7 psi. When the throttle is open and the pressure comes up, now this line is going to have enough pressure to push the 15-pound port check valve open, and that's when the fuel starts flowing through the ports and things get really loud. So that's our hat, that's our low-speed idle system. Now we get to the ports. So our stagger in the ports is going to be approximately, it's going to be the same. We're going to start off the same as the stagger in the hat. So we're going to have 80s in the front two cylinders, 70s, 60s, wait, we're going to talk about that in a second, and then 50s at the back. This set of port lines it's a set that I just had laying around my house from way back when, and I'm missing the number 8 line here. So if you're missing one right here, that's why. I just don't happen to have it. But that's going to be our stagger. 80s, 70s, 60s, 50s. With one exception, and that's number 6. Every conventional or older style Chrysler 392 or 426 blown motor, they all have a common open plenum. Okay? Now, there's a unique situation that happens with these engines, and it has to do with the firing order. Right? 1, 8, 4, 3, 6, 5, 7, 2. So this 1, 3, 5, 7, 2, 4, 6, and our imaginary 8. All right. 1, 8, 4, 3, 6, 5, 7, 2. 3, 6, 5, 7. So 3, 6, 5, 7. What's happening is, as the engine is running, okay, there's a pulse, or a vacuum, I should say, a tendency for the fuel to head in the direction of 7 and 8. So 3 fires first, right? So 3's got the suction pulling this way. Then 5 and 7 with a big pulse this way, and they steal from number 6. So number 6 is always going to be the angry cylinder. And you start off by hedging your bets with number 6 by putting a slightly bigger nozzle in there. So we're going to have 80s, 70s, and then a 65 in number 6, and then a 50 in number 8. And that should put you in the ballpark. Now, you won't know if it's exactly right until you run the thing a couple of times. Every engine is a little bit different. Every blower is a little bit different. I'm giving you a ballpark starting point. You're going to have to start reading heat from the spark plugs and other things that you really shouldn't see heat in. But you're gonna use those things as your judgment as to how you're going to balance these nozzles. You may find that number 1 is a little on the lean side, so you have to increase the nozzle there. Oh yeah, I wanted to show you this too. Where is it? I had a nozzle. Oh, there you go. All right. So this is a nozzle holder. And this gets screwed into the port, the intake manifold. It's just like the ones that are here in the hat, okay? But this gets screwed into the intake manifold, directly into the port, and the opening is facing towards the valve. Some people like to bias them one way or the other. It's facing towards the valve. And then this is your nozzle, which is the jet. And this screws into here, like so, and then the line screws on like that. And that's the fuel system. Okay. Now, I covered the idle mixture. All right. In my opinion and experience, one of the most important parts of the run, if not the most important part of the run, is when you're backing up from the burnout. And this has to do with nitro and the load-sensitive nature of nitro, and the fact that each cylinder needs enough heat to support combustion when the throttle's open. So if you watch a fuel car do a burnout, you'll see that they'll roll through the water, they hit the throttle, the car jumps up on the tire, and then it'll start dropping cylinders. It'll start spraying fuel, raw fuel, out of random cylinders. It'll pick 2, 3, or 4 cylinders, and they're just dead. As the car is doing a burnout, those cylinders aren't needed. Nitro is load sensitive. So the amount of fuel the engine is going to consume, the amount of fuel that the engine is going to burn is in direct relation to the load that it sees. So because the car is essentially freewheeling during the burnout, there isn't enough load to keep 8 cylinders happy. So dropping cylinders on a burnout is normal. But now you get to where car's out there, car is stopped now, in reverse, and are starting to back up. That's the time that you need to watch the pipes. And if necessary, make your adjustments behind the line. So as the car is backing up, you want to make sure each cylinder is firing. You don't want to see, like fuel blowing out of any given hole. Because if you see that, if the engine hasn't picked up a cylinder after the burnout, it's not going to have enough heat when it stages and the throttle is open. It's not going to have enough heat to light that fuel or that extra fuel. So that cylinder is going to be dead at the hit. Sometimes it'll pick it up at the hit because the load is just severe. The clutch comes in, everything locks down solid. It'll light for a second, but if that cylinder doesn't have enough temperature in it, it'll drop it as it goes down the track. So that's something you got to keep in mind. Your valve settings, very important. You may, at some point, as the car is backing up, we used to drill holes in the hat and cover them with duct tape. And so if you needed to add a little air to lean the motor a little bit at idle, you could do that. You don't want to, during that moment between the time the car is, back up from the burnout before it stages, you don't want to be screwing around with the valve unless you have to. So sometimes just letting a little air into the engine by uncovering a hole, that will lean it out a little bit. But that's, like I said, in my opinion, that's the most important part of the run. After the burnout, backing up, and then before the car starts to stage, that's when you need to make sure that everything is lit, or each cylinder is firing, and it's building that heat that it's going to need when the throttle is open and all of that fuel just starts rushing in there like a garden hose. Okay, what else did I want to cover on this? There's a circuit that's not going to be on this car. You'll see a lot of times on these K valves, on the bottom outlet, the one that runs around to the port nozzles, you'll see another check valve, and that'll be a high-speed lean out. So that'll be shimmed so that at a given pressure, whatever pressure is deemed necessary, that check valve will open and start sending fuel back to the tank. So that, let's say you need maximum fuel at the hit, and then as the car goes down the track, the acceleration forces start to diminish a little bit. You may have a little too much fuel going through, it's a little bit fat, so that will open and send some fuel back to the tank. There are other ways to lean an engine or fatten an engine. Fuel percentage, load. If you've got a car that's a little fat and lazy, so let's say it hits good and it runs to half track strong, and then it's just not, it doesn't have it on the second half, it starts to, the mile an hour isn't there. You can increase, if you have wings on the car, like for instance, this car that we're working with has canard wings, and you can actually get more aggressive with the wings create a little more resistance, that'll burn fuel and give it the same effect as leaning out the general mixture. You can lean or richen through fuel percentage. Like if you're running 88 to 90%, you want to lean it out a little bit. You go to 90, 92%. Vice versa, an engine seems a little angry, showing a lot of heat. You can back it back down from 92, 90, to 88, 87, 86, however far you have to go. But you can't go too far because the balance of the rest of the system is predicated on you maintaining a fairly consistent percentage. And I like to go right around 90%. It's a nice round number, and you can go either way. You've got enough alcohol in there to make sure that the cylinders are going to light, and you can go either way. You can go from 92 to 88, and the tune is pretty much going to be the same, but it gives you enough leeway to play around with it, along with those other things. So, okay, I think I covered everything I needed to cover. The link to the first part of this will be in the description, the one we shot last night, and I'm not sure we're going to pick this up again. I'll know after I talk to Jeff and I find out. He's out of town right now. When he gets back, we'll see what the next step is. Carl will be here in about 2 weeks. So until then, we're still gathering parts and playing around with this stuff. But we got a lot of information. I hope you guys are enjoying this. And that's it. I'll see you tomorrow.